Thank you for being here on June 23rd for our fourth session for June CLC for all of our IIDA chapter leaders. We're so glad to have you here today. As we've done with all of the June sessions, we're going to be recording this program so that way you and your other chapter leaders could potentially watch and consume it later for those who couldn't make it. Again, we're also going to be doing a breakout room session for those who are interested and available to participate. You will get an email from us with that link closer to the end of this program. We'll also be putting it in the chat for you all so you can click through it and attend if you're able to. So I want to get started here with this program. My name is Ryan Ben, and I'm the Director of Association Experience. I would imagine that most of you probably have this information already, but just in case you're new or you haven't been able to attend a CLC session, I'm really excited for you to be here. I work at the IIDA headquarters, and today we're going to be talking all about our Campus Center Best Thing Ever Award winner, University of Tennessee, Knoxville. In order to do that, I've asked the group who put together the submission for this year's Best Thing Ever Award to join me in talking through the submission, sharing some tips, tricks, and pieces of expertise. So, Allie, can you join us so we can have you introduce yourself to everybody and tell us who you are? Oh, Allie, I think you might still be muted.
Sorry about that.
You're great.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Allie Bierman. I just recently graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and yes, thank you. And I am currently employed as a member of an interior design team at ESA in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allie. Really appreciate it. Liz, can you join us and introduce yourself to everybody who's attending?
Hi, I'm Liz Teston. I'm an associate professor at the University of Tennessee and the faculty advisor for IIDA Collaborative and liaison for IIDA East Tennessee.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Liz. I really appreciate it. Caitlin, can you join us and introduce yourself to everybody who's watching?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having us. My name is Caitlin Turner. I just graduated from the University of Tennessee this past spring. But I will be going back in the fall to study architecture for grad school. In the summer, I'm interning at ESA in Nashville. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do not work at ESA, but I'm glad we have so many people who are working there. That's awesome to hear. Congratulations to all of you. I really appreciate it. So what I wanted to do today, and I wanted to ask you all here, because you all submitted an incredible submission for our Campus Center Awards for this year. And you had a lot to say about the relatively new group that you formed, some of the really cool activities that you did. And I thought it would just be really beneficial for us here at headquarters and also for all of our chapters to just hear kind of about what you submitted, why you submitted it, and why you all think that what you created at your campus center is so valuable and so meaningful to each of you and all of the other members. And so what I wanted to do first and foremost was bring up this slide about who you all are. I thought this was a really good way to begin the submission for this program by sharing with us this kind of like overview of, what the IIDA Collaborative was, who you all were. So real quickly, just to start off, what was IIDA Collaborative and how did it kind of overlap and interact with the IIDA members?
Yes, so IIDA Collaborative, it kind of came out of the pandemic, in all honesty. Allie and I had discussed a lot about, kind of revitalizing, revamping our IIDA Campus Center. And when we got sent home and, a lot of these issues kind of got brought to the forefront and we saw this need for community. We saw this need to create a sense of place, an identifiable kind of connection for students. And so we kind of decided to rebrand it a little bit and create IIDA Collaborative. So it was kind of a summer full of branding, which we'll talk about later, and kind of talking about our goals and really what our campus center needed. So that's kind of the general idea of what IIDA Collaborative came from.
That's really, really helpful to hear. One of the things I noticed when I was going through the submissions is there seemed to be a real emphasis on creating a safe and supportive place for peers. I imagine that some of that is a response to the pandemic that you're describing, but also what does safe and supportive mean for you, and why was that so important?
Yeah, so it did, especially come from going virtual, but it was something we had discussed beforehand as well. We really just wanted a space, even if it was virtual, that people could come and connect. And I know Allie can back me up on this. We have, even just graduating, I know students in all 4 years now, and they've come to me for advice. They've come to me even post-graduation asking questions and kind of creating that extra layer of support within the college. And we are in a big college. It's College of Architecture and Design. So kind of creating that unique separate experience where we can really connect with one another, because we know what we're going through, we know how to handle the stress and kind of how to support one another in a safe space. So that was something I think we really wanted to keep at the forefront of our conversation when developing IIDA Collaborative.
That's really awesome.
I think I'll add to that as well. It wasn't only a, a community, feel. We also wanted to develop a culture of shared knowledge so that you could grow in community socially and then academically as well, so it could benefit both sides to what the college experience is really like in design school. So that was definitely a part of it as well.
That was, yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like what I'm hearing too is it wasn't just about physical safety. What that word also meant for all of you was the safety to be able to fail, a safety to be vulnerable, to ask questions, to maybe not necessarily only be interacting with your age group or peer group. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. I think that's something we all struggle with, especially in design school, is being able to fail a little bit. So I think that's an interesting point to bring up, is kind of creating a safe space where you can just be vulnerable about what you're dealing with and, the bad review you had the other day or something. So
Ryan, to your point, I think also asking peers questions, especially when we're in this virtual context, was important to the students amongst different cohorts as well.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful to add. It really jumped out to me, and I think it's part of the reason why your submission did so well with our jury. I want to jump into the next slide. I want to try and cover as much as we can. So you all put together this great slide to kind of talk through your team, who got involved. This is a question we get all of the time from chapters and campus center leaders, which is how do we build this group? How do we physically get these people together? How do we compel them to be participants? How do we encourage them to be leaders or volunteers? So could you just talk through how the team, how did these Avengers get assembled? What is their backstory? Can you just talk us through a little bit of that? I think it'd be helpful.
Sure, yeah, I can take that one. So I think the most important part that Caitlin and I recognize is we couldn't do this by ourselves. There was a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of work involved in keeping a chapter running smoothly, in terms of communication and social media representation. And there's a lot of moving parts. And I think there's an equal amount of moving parts in design school, which can be really overwhelming. And we saw in previous years of our specific chapter at UTK that there was only a select few people that were taking all of those jobs on. So Caitlin and I really wanted to build a large team and give everyone manageable amounts of responsibility so that they could feel they could take ownership in the parts that they were contributing. And another part of that was we wanted everyone every year, every cohort to be able to have a representative and to be able to have an opportunity to get involved, not only to foster community within an officer group, but build and encourage people to stay with leadership roles and to grow in them and to kind of mentor younger. At the time that we created IIDA Collaborative, we were fourth year. So we felt like we could mentor younger years in kind of leadership roles as well. So, like planting that seed of like leadership really is something that is so valuable that you know, I attribute a lot of my success in getting a job to being in leadership roles. And so I think everyone came from pretty different backgrounds. Everyone has a different passion. So they kind of, we sent out a call for applications and everyone kind of landed where they felt their passion. So.
That's really, really helpful to hear. I want to, again, just knowing who the audience is for this, I want to hear just a little bit more. What did that call look like? How did you solicit these volunteers? Was it an email? Did you stand in front of studios and just, passionately talk about the program? Well, how did you do it?
So this was May of 2020, or early June. So we weren't in school. Everyone was pretty, we just finished the first online semester hybrid. So everyone was kind of burnt out from being on Zoom, from being in class. So we kind of first kind of recruited from within our group messages that we have with a lot of cohorts. Caitlin and I have been teaching assistants. So we called on those group messages. And then we eventually just used our college-wide listserv to develop an email list of potential people that might be interested. And Caitlin and I put together just a slide deck, just like our submission, and said, these would be the responsibilities for each position. And we kind of gave an overview of what we thought the time commitment might look like. So we really honest and forward up front, like maybe a representative position might not be as involved as the treasurer. And so we let people choose and kind of, grow where they're planted a little and choose where they wanted to fit in, based on what they knew their class schedule was going to be like in the next year.
Ali, can I interject? I just want to say, I think that this is the most successful thing that you guys did. I'm really proud of how you not only put together that deck of different responsibilities, but also started with what you believe in and what your goals were for the next year. So I think that helped get people interested in joining you on board because you already had a framework of what you wanted to pursue. And then also, maybe you'll talk about this more in a moment, but the fact that they're not all folks from fourth year like you, they're from all different years.
Yeah, we kind of had to convince people that this was a thing that was, because, before our chapter wasn't really known for doing much. And so we kind of had to change the narrative a little and say, no, these are our plans. These are Caitlin and I's vision for what we want to do. Hop on board if you want to participate, and it worked.
And do you think all of this too, again, another challenge / opportunity we hear all the time about from campus centers is, it's hard to keep people involved. It's hard to make the buy-in of the time, and everybody's very busy and there are scheduling challenges. Do you think everything you've just described, do you think that addressed that as well? Is that why people showed up? Is that why people stuck around? Yeah.
I think people want to know what they're going to get out of it, especially in design school. It's very hard to convince people that they can do other activities other than studio. So it needs to pay off in some way, especially if you're paying dues or if you're giving to any organization, you want to know what you're getting out of it. So in that original slide deck, Caitlin and I already had programming ideas that honestly, we didn't know if they were going to pan out, but we said, this is the dream, this is the goal. And it ended up we've got a great team to put those events together, but people want to know what they're going to get out of it. And so if you can make that promise and keep it, I think that's really important.
That's awesome. That's really, really good to hear. Let me get into the next slide here. So you've mentioned this already, you had some goals, you had some very specific actions. I'm sharing the slide that you all submitted just so people can kind of get a look at this. And just real quickly, I'll let folks know too that I'll be sharing this entire presentation as alongside the video and the recording. So that way, anybody who wants to kind of look at it in more detail, they can. But you've already kind of hinted at the fact that you put together a lot of information in advance to solicit people to then help you do those things. I'm interested in hearing, how did you settle on these goals? Why were these goals important to you all? And then lastly, how do you think these goals were reflective of both people who might want to volunteer and also your local design community? So I guess first and foremost, how did you pick these goals?
Yeah, so like you said, it kind of started with that initial conversation before we even had a leadership team. We were like, okay, let's break it down. What are the main goals here? Obviously, membership. We need members. We need a group of people, or we're not really going to accomplish anything. So how are we going to get members? That's number one. And then also service was really important to us. We saw a need in the design community that we wanted to give our members an opportunity to give back to the community. And something I think me and Allie are both really passionate about is the ability for design to serve the needs of others. So recognizing that in our organization, and then recognizing scholarship, kind of on both ends of recognizing people for their success, but also on the side of kind of going back to membership. What if people can't afford this? How are we going to support them through that? And that became a very big conversation throughout the year. And I think that conversation will continue. And then also, as we mentioned, community. So kind of recognizing that need to foster those connections that will continue beyond college. So we kind of broke those down. And then once we got our leadership team, we started having those conversations. What do you want to see out of it? And kind of asking them, what do they want? Because as Allie said, people want to know what they're going to get out of being in an organization, especially if they are paying dues or they're committing that time. And time is so precious in college. Why are they committing that time? So kind of asking them and gaining that feedback too. So it was kind of always an open conversation, but I think setting those kind of 4 main categories allowed us to kind of categorize those conversations a little bit better.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful to hear. We got a question from somebody that I think it's relevant to this part of the discussion, and I think it'll come up again later too. But what you all are working with Liz, you're working with the design community at your school, but I also know that you worked with your local chapter, your IIDA chapter. Were they a part of kind of maybe forming these goals or giving you ideas of what they could look like? Just kind of curious.
Yes, actually, when we first, before we got our leadership team last May, me and Allie put together a little presentation and contacted Liz and our liaison at the time, Erin Metelka, and we met with her and kind of presented our idea, which we had no idea where that was going to go. This was day 1 of this journey. But Erin was extremely supportive of that. And she was there the entire way. And we also worked with her to create some programming with the IIDA East Tennessee chapter as well. And now Liz is kind of taking on that role. So I don't know if she wants to add anything, but.
Sure. Erin Metelka has been awesome. She's moving, so we had a little switch. But what I really like about the IIDA Tennessee chapter's structure is that within each city center or region, like in East Tennessee, there is a liaison that serves as kind of a conduit between the campus center and the city center. So Erin, as Allie and Caitlin were developing this programming, advocated for scholarships and other service projects to the East Tennessee group and communicated back and forth. I'm just starting that role, and we have some things cooking up for the future that I'll talk about in a minute. But I like that as a structure of how there's someone that is kind of serving on both groups to advocate for the students' needs.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's exactly, I think that's really, really tangible, specific advice. So I appreciate you sharing it. Awesome. Yeah, I want to keep moving through this. I want to get to this next slide, this communication slide. When talking with the jury who reviewed all these submissions, they thought that this was really, really well done. And so I wanted to specifically share this because I think you all put together a pretty comprehensive and not necessarily arduous package for communicating with your members. I think some people sometimes don't do this enough, and then I think other people are doing it too often, and it becomes this like very difficult chore. So I think you threaded the needle well. So I just wanted to hear, like, how has the response been to the way you've been communicating with your members, specifically the newsletter or some of the social media moments? And then also just, has this been effective, or are there things about it that you're planning on changing in the future?
Yeah, so the newsletter, I'll start with that. The initial response was pretty good actually with the newsletter. I will say I don't know if it's going to continue being an effective resource. It might be, but during a virtual time where we had to communicate in a variety of different ways, we knew that email was going to be one of those ways. So we decided to kind of make it fun, make it exciting, include all of the Zoom links for different events in one place, have them organized, have information about things happening with IIDA, and have resources about where to go to check out this event on campus, or who to contact for this. And so it was kind of this like one-stop location for just all the information you could need right then. And it kind of became a bi-weekly thing. Moving forward, I don't know exactly what they'll do since we won't have Zoom links and things like that. But I think it was a good source of communication. But I think what really benefited us the most was having layers of communication. So not just a newsletter, not just an email, but having social media, having announcements about important events in classes. That was a little bit more rare just because time is hard. But if you have, a new membership event at the beginning of the year, we were in every year, we found a class to come, and me and Allie showed our faces, even if it was on Zoom, and we had a little slide deck and we presented, because that's what gets people involved. But I think social media has been extremely beneficial for us. It's just the easiest way to connect with college students. They can be swiping through Instagram and they're like, oh, an event, I'd love to go to that, whereas an email, they may or may not fully look at it and fully absorb it. So I think kind of recognizing the different needs of communication and kind of how to best use those. But this is something, last summer we said, communication, we have to figure that out, because if we don't have clear communication, nothing's really going to happen. We're not going to get members to show up to events. We're not going to create an identity for ourselves, which is kind of where the brand kit came in, was creating.
Yeah, talk me through that process real quick, not to interrupt you, but you segued very naturally into it and then I interrupted. But can you tell us a little bit more about the brand identity and how you came up with it?
Yes, yeah. So this was a fun process. It's kind of funny because it was this design project for us almost over the summer, and it's many iterations, many fun meetings over Zoom in the middle of the summer, and this was after having a leadership team. So we had people that could kind of vote on it, come up with different ideas, give different feedback. And it was a really interesting conversation, kind of about not only what do we want our image to be for the school, but what do we want our image to be for our members? How is this logo not too gender oriented? How is this logo not, how does it really recognize our group and everyone that's in it, and kind of create an identity for us within the college?
Do you think, this is just an impromptu question you inspired me to ask real quick. It sounds like you all engaging in this iterative design process about the brand and logo. I bet that set up a really good foundation for you all to have meaningful conversations about events and programs and who you all were. It seems like a really good place to start as a group, because I feel like if you could do that well and successfully, and then everyone felt like they were heard and were a part of it, I imagine that would have bled into the rest of the programming and events. Do I have that right, or do you think I'm making too much of it?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome to hear.
It opened up, I think, a really important conversation for us. It started as, what are we going to put on our t-shirt? You know, kind of what's our image? What's it going to look like? And then it became, who are we? You know, and what do we want this organization to really be and really mean for the future? So.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to hit it. I think you said it very well. It's very cool to give yourselves the opportunity to start with something more granular or, simplistic or however you want to phrase it, but then let that like evolve and grow into a conversation about, yeah, we could just make this a logo, but maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about who we are, what we want, why it's important to us, and the kind of place we want to leave, knowing that some of us are going to transition into employment or other programs after this. So what will be the leave behind? I just think you did an excellent job with all of that. So philanthropy, this is something that we talk about a lot with campus centers. It's a suggestion often from headquarters and chapters as a way to create a program or build off an existing program. Sounds like you all had some pretty successful philanthropic efforts, and you did this in a pandemic. So I feel like some of the lessons here are particularly interesting. So can you talk me through the philanthropy side of your group and how you landed on these programs and then how you got them done?
Sure. Delaney O'Brien was the philanthropy chair. She did a great job starting to look at various off-campus outdoor things that can happen during the pandemic. You see in these images, Caitlin, Allie, and all the others working at the Knoxville Botanical Gardens. She was also setting up some kind of workshops and such with the local school district for K through 12 programming. And then you can also see these gift bags to thank the essential workers at the university. So I think that what each of these things starts to touch on is bringing together the community within the local chapter, but also communicating to the new membership that spatial justice and also giving back is the critical part of being a designer. So
Yeah,
Caitlin,
that's really helpful to hear. Yeah, please go ahead.
I was just gonna, yeah, I can add. I think I'll be honest, I think it's challenging for students to kind of wrap their head around philanthropy and service when there are a million other things going through your head, especially Caitlin and I's head, trying to like round up, 10 people and be great leaders for 10 of your peers and be responsible for all of that. And then service, as one of our core values, we felt like we could be doing more. And so that led to like further conversations with Liz and with Delaney and saying, how can we make this more important, more of a focus for our members so that they can feel like they're actually participating in the community. And I think it's important to be open about what is important to students and what is important to the community in general. And it's hard. It's a struggle to make that a consistent priority. But once you do and get people invested, then it becomes a lot easier to maintain membership and participation in those contexts. So I think Liz played a really big role in trying to say, no, we can do, like, let's do more. Let's you have great programming, scheduled for the fall, but let's do more in service. And so I think because we pushed that really far, our members felt like they were getting a lot more out of the organization.
Yeah.
And
Please
I'll
do.
briefly, I think also creating that position of philanthropy chair, having Delaney, who is incredible. We love her. And she was a second year. She's going into third year. So she's going to continue. She's serving in a different role, but she really stepped up to the plate and was that voice saying, okay, here are events we can do. And we talked to her at the beginning. We're like, okay, this is you. We're giving you, we're trusting you with this. and she took it. And I think kind of having that conversation with her, even as a second year, she came to us and she said, okay, here are these ideas. She had like a list of many ideas, and big and small, which is also important. So she had some goals that they'll probably continue talking about for years to come, but then having small events like going to the botanical gardens or the essential workers goodie bags, and having kind of different layers of service opportunities, I think worked out really well.
Yeah, I really think I want to pull out from that idea of scale and scope. I think that that's actually a really important note, especially when we're talking about, you know, philanthropy on top of being a member and a volunteer. I mean, at that point, you're like 3 or 4 degrees away from what you might consider your primary purpose at design school, which is doing the work, going to studio. So I think it's interesting to hear you talk about how you thought about different scales of projects. You thought about what the different volunteer needs would be. What can we do right away? What will take longer? What could we do a small version of now, knowing that maybe one day we'd want to get to 50 people at the Botanic Garden instead of 10. That's an important note. So I just kind of wanted to share that again. I think it's really helpful to hear.
Ryan, I really like that you brought that up because there's a certain pace to the academic year, right? So if I remember correctly, there were 2 botanical gardens events in the fall, and they were paced so that they were not at mid reviews or final reviews, right? And then the smaller events or the goodie bags and things were occurring when it might be a little bit busier for those students. So to think about that ahead of time in terms of pacing it with the academic year, I think will help this kind of programming be more successful.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for pulling that out for us. I really, really appreciate hearing that. I think that what I'm inspired to take away from this too, and to hopefully share with other folks, is to start somewhere, just get started, do something, but also like don't accidentally let the fact that maybe there's something you really want to do that you can't for some reason stop you from doing the thing that you can do. I feel like you all did a very good job of having like a transparent, honest conversation about what you could do, and then trying to do those things, and the things that you couldn't or didn't want to, not burdening yourself with them. I think that that's really smart. So professional development. I just want to hear more about this. This is, again, very similar to philanthropy. I think this is a question we get all the time at IIDA headquarters. I think it's a question we get a lot from our chapter leaders and volunteers. So how did you all decide on what this component of your group was going to look like? Did you work with other educators or the chapter? Again, I just would love to hear more about how you put together the professional development arm of your organization.
Yes, so this was a major part of programming for the fall and the spring. Caitlin and I knew that we were leaving in a year, and we had so much knowledge to share with other people. All of the 4th years and the 3rd years can share knowledge. So in that culture of being able to ask questions and things, we were able to listen to the feedback we were getting from if, let's say, a lot of the first years were asking questions about Illustrator or something, we can create programming based on the needs of the chapter. And so that was something that was really a forefront in planning for that. And part of our leadership team, we included a role for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year representatives. And their roles were to listen to the aches and the pains and the successes of their year, bring it back to us so we can include relevant programming. And so, we're not going to plan something that is just maybe somebody already knows that, or they're not going to cover that until the spring. So we were really aware of what were the actual needs, because this is, again, it's technically taking away from studio time when you're participating in these things. Unfortunately, we have that mindset of we need to be working. So we wanted to create these relevant things. Some of those opportunities that we heard about were portfolio development. That's always kind of a pain point for people coming up into 3rd and 4th year for for our members. So we just wanted to be really honest and share our experiences and take advantage of the wealth of knowledge in our college. So we really leaned on Liz for contacts on the outside profession, Erin Metelka for contacting people in the field in Knoxville, and even our own professors, other professors to create programming, extra programming outside of the classroom that would be beneficial. So we had a portfolio design workshop where we talked about fundamentals, how to get started. In Q&As with professors, we had a lot of questions about our own 4+2 program, which includes the Masters of Architecture that Caitlin is a part of. People wanted to know more about that. So we held an event to focus on just a Q&A with professors to get their questions answered. And the list goes on of the things that we did, but we just wanted to share our experiences firsthand in conjunction with professionals and kind of lean on their expertise.
Yeah, that's really, really great to hear. I'm curious, is there a built-in feedback moment for some of these programs to hear from people who participated or facilitated them as a speaker? Maybe, do you have a moment where you can kind of digest it and learn from it and try and make it better next time? Or what does that look like for your group?
So in the fall, we definitely had some moments where we're like, did this work? Like Caitlin and I are on the other side of Zoom saying, oh, this is so great. Look at how many people showed up. And then we're like, did people get anything out of this? Like, is this something that we can replicate? Is this something we do again? And so we leaned on our officers to ask their friends, say, did you go? Did you get something out of that? And we kind of curated, we just constantly improved. And if something didn't work, we're not going to do it again. So that constant improvement of just listening and I think that creates another layer of that community of just saying, no, like I liked this one. I like this program, the InDesign tutorials, more than the portfolio. Maybe that was because in the season of design school that they're in, it applied to them more. So we just made those adjustments going forward.
I'm laughing a little bit about your question, Ryan, because I remember talking to one of the IIDA Collaborative students, and when we had a panel discussion with some regional designers and sales reps, he told me that the IMs during the panel discussion were blowing up about stuff that some of the panelists were saying. And while it's not like a formal way to get feedback, I think that's a sign that it's successful and people are talking about it the next day. Mm-hmm. Another one that I really liked was the Q&A and also alumni questions, like a day in the life of alumni. When you guys put that in your Instagram stories, I love the panel discussions, but sometimes if somebody's busy, they can't watch it at that moment. But if it's in your Instagram story, you can still kind of access it in your own time.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that scope and scale a little bit too with this. Having those different professional development doesn't have to be a full lecture series. That was great, and I hope they continue doing lecture series, but that's not the only layer of it. I think having some social media, we had some InDesign tutorials. We even got some feedback on Instagram from members just saying, hey, what programming would you like to see this spring? We'd love to hear from you. And we got a ton of responses just on Instagram. So kind of giving people easy ways to respond and just kind of opening that door, I think really helped.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that Caitlin and I had to learn, it was definitely a learning curve, but as long as you're flexible, that's great, but being flexible and consistent at the same time. So you're not changing everything at the minute something doesn't work, but you're being consistent and saying, okay, but we're going to show up for you this way. It might be different, but we're going to keep showing up for you. And that consistency builds a lot of trust, and it keeps members engaged and caring about what we're doing. So
Yeah, that I'm gonna write that one down too, Allie. Thank you. That's a good note just for me. So I appreciate it. It's awesome to hear. I think that that's right on the money. So I love that. Thank you. I want to talk about this slide because I do think that, again, this is one of the ones that really stuck out to the jury. It stuck out to me. We talked about it a little bit already. I think you all put forward a priority of making sure that the people who were involved in your group and who were volunteering and who were showing up, that they were going to feel safe, they were going to feel well, and they were going to have a good time, and that nobody had to worry about it being anything other than that. I just kind of want to talk through this because I think that this will be something that campus centers and IIDA groups, chapters, all of us, we're going to have to think a little harder about this kind of work to make it so it is a place where it feels equitable and inclusive to all. And I think you all communicated that in this slide. And so I just want to hear from the three of you, why again was this important to you? And then what did it end up looking like? You put forward this idea of self-care. What did it end up really actually looking like? What did you hear from people and what did you end up doing?
I think after the summer of like uncertainty, a lot of our peers had their internships canceled. A lot of classes were up in the air, whether it's going to be in person or virtual. That was a huge stress on our community. And we were having officer meetings where one week we were saying, oh, we're going to be able to do this in person. The next week, it didn't really look like that, and it was taking a toll on Caitlin and I and our officer group. We're like, we really just need to be together and be okay just being together when we don't know what's going to happen. And we know that no matter what, we're still in design school, we still have studio, but the rest of the world was a little foggy and like just very uncertain. So a lot of the fall programming was completely focused on self-care. And I think in design school, there's you can say that design culture and studio culture, and our college does an amazing job of trying to find that balance, but it's really up to the peers to support having balance. If your friends are staying up in the studio until 5 a.m., there's not much the school can do about promoting that studio culture. So we wanted to provide people kind of like events where they can just come and be and still be together and still be designers together, students together, but just be more engaged with ourselves while everything was kind of spinning around. So what that looked like is again, we kind of leveraged our relationships with professors. We have an amazing lecturer, Suzanne Bennett, and she actually led a lot of yoga on Caitlin and I study abroad trip. So we brought her in and had a meditation session. We went out and did yoga, and it didn't have to be about studio. We didn't have to talk about studio. And so giving people a moment of respite was really helpful. Promoting sustainable habits, even on social media, and just challenging people to say, take a break from your laptop for a minute today, because you've been on Zoom for 8 hours. So.
And I'll add to that too. In the matter of full honesty, some of these events didn't get the turnout we were hoping for. In all honesty, they did not. They were pretty early on in the fall semester. People didn't really know exactly what they had gotten into yet. And we said, okay, we have 5-6 people here. Great. We'll record this Zoom. We'll send it out. And I think what we saw is even just having those events, we had to have those, even if they didn't turn out perfectly. It opened up a conversation. It showed our members that this is something we valued. It's something we recognized. And I think it just evolved from there. Part of it combined with philanthropy and became, getting outside and serving in the gardens. Part of it became having a coffee event one day outside of our building and kind of getting outside in the spring. And so it kind of evolved into other things. So I would just add, events that we had that, didn't have the best turnout, don't let that discourage you. Use it to leverage something else and kind of open a conversation for the next event.
That's awesome, Caitlin. That's super helpful. I really put the meeting room link in the chat. So we've got another couple of questions to go through, but that'll be there for us when we get a little closer to noon. I just want to say real quick that was really helpful to hear about how you just kind of channeled some stuck-to-itiveness to kind of just say, you know what, that's okay that there's not that many people here at this event. We'll do it again later, or we'll listen to folks and do something else again later. That must have been very challenging in the environment that was 2020. And so I just want to say kudos to all of you for doing that. I think it's really impressive that you kind of just, you were never stubborn, but you did, give it your all. You channeled some grit, and I just think that's really cool. So last and certainly not least, though, I would really love to hear about what you all are planning for the future. Now, I know, everybody apparently is employed by ESA now, so I know there's probably you're not as involved as you used to be, but I would love to hear what's ahead for this group. What are you imagining they're going to get into next? What is their future going to look like, do you think?
Well, I was just talking to the upcoming IIDA Collaborative President and Vice President, Tyler Trent and Kelly Weeks. They're trying to sort out what they're doing next year. And there's some things that Allie and Caitlin and the others set up that will be coming back next year, like that self-care week that we were just talking about, or the portfolio workshops and panel discussions. But one like next level emphasis that I think is really exciting is that they're continuing on with the mentor and mentee program. Guys, they probably have already contacted you about like connecting with the students maybe, but for alumni or also mentors and mentees within the undergraduate program, but also really importantly, being a positive kind of like source of social change in the design industry. So, what else have you heard from these guys or that you know about, Caitlin and Allie?
I have not heard a lot. I want to catch up with them soon. I know they're hard at work. That is what I've heard. I've heard from a few of the other officers. They're like, we've already had a few meetings, like we're getting stuff going. And it's exciting to hear, because I think for me and Allie, that was kind of the goal from the beginning, was to create a legacy. It's really doesn't matter that much to us if, one great year and then you're done. We want something that's going to last and that's going to create change for the future. And something we did see was our membership increased and was retained in the spring. So that was great. And I think that will be a continued trend in the fall. And we had a great new officer team that was elected. They're all super excited and super passionate about it, which is exciting for us to see, which is another reason that leadership is so important, because it does get people very invested. They have this kind of sense of ownership within the organization. And so kind of fostering that. And then we have on here too, creating partnerships. So we started some, but that's kind of a long-term goal. So that's something they're going to have to continue in the future, but keeping that conversation open. And then also professional network, growing that, which it sounds like they are working on from Liz. So something else that I mentioned earlier was scholarship. So I know that is a huge conversation for many chapters. How do we create an environment where people who may not be able to afford it can still be a part of it? How do we make it equitable for everyone? And I think Liz is going to really be kind of a strong source for that conversation to continue. But I will say we started that conversation, creating scholarships within our own organization, kind of creating some financial plans, but also with IIDA East Tennessee, and just kind of started opening that door. So hopefully that conversation will continue as well.
I will add one
Sorry.
thing.
Go ahead, Allie.
Yeah, sorry. I will add one thing, and it sums it up really well. Is the leadership transition was a huge priority for Caitlin and I. So we had to make sure that we weren't just going to give people some passwords and say good luck. I'm done. And so it's communicating what our goals were at the beginning. We have all of the officers will be returning, and then even more. We have some new faces as well, but it's saying, okay, what were the goals May 2020? What happened? What didn't happen? Reflect on that, and having conversations with the next officer in your position and saying, how can you help me finish what we started, and then having a conversation about goals going forward. That officer transition period is so important, so people don't feel like they're starting from square one. There is a framework for them to continue working, and they're working so hard this summer to plan well in advance. They already have spring things laid out, or ideas that they want to do that they're already budgeting for. So I think that's a major part of it, is just preparing other people to take your place. Is honestly, it's just the responsible thing to do. So.
Ellie, I mean, you're like my new hero. That's so cool. I really appreciate it. I brought up the thank you and FAQ slide. I would love to, if we've got any questions from people, please throw them in the chat real quick. While we wait for anyone to maybe pepper us with something, again, I just want to remind you that the meeting link, if you're able to join us for another maybe smaller, more intimate discussion, we have that available for you. And real quick, just from the three of you, any other last, tiny snippets of advice that you can share with chapters, faculty advisors, campus center leaders, anybody like that, that you could share with us?
I think I'll say one thing. I'm never short of words, but I think I'll say it's okay to not, especially in leadership roles, trying to lead 50 people at once, it's okay to not please everyone all of the time. That's something that Caitlin and I really had to learn to be okay with, is not everyone's going to be completely satisfied all of the time. Not all of the officers are going to agree at once. But just being consistent, like I said, and flexible enough to admit when things need to change, I think is really important. And it is also not okay to give 100% all of the time when you have mid-reviews coming up. That's why it was important that we had a large team. So we took sabbatical weeks. We were just like, I can't look at this. I need someone else to take care of these tasks. I can't look at this. I have a presentation next week. That's okay. That's sustainable. So I think that's another thing that really worked for us, is being able to hand off tasks when a first year might be able to do something. So that was another thing that really worked. But I'm excited
awesome
to see
hear.
what student chapters are doing in the future. So.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I just can't say it enough. I look forward to reading your lifestyle book in 10 years when you finally write it, and you can give us all this advice in print. Liz, any other pieces of advice for folks in your position from the faculty chapter end?
Sure. I think in my teaching, but also in, advising students like Allie and Caitlin, I try to listen first to what their goals are, and then help be like a conduit to achieve those goals. And that can sometimes be a little bit more time consuming in the end, right? In order to go back and forth and mediate that. But I think that it's critical to get buy-in, and also then to go back to the city center or state chapter to advocate for what the students are trying to do. One thing that I had forgotten to mention is that upcoming participation in the Threads competition that the state's doing. I think it was called Dressed in IIDA, Georgia. So it's something different in every region, but that was just a recent kind of advocacy thing that needed to happen to say that these future professional designers should be participating in these kinds of things. So to go back and forth and to listen to the needs of both the students and the professionals, I think is super critical.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Caitlin, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd say everything that Allie has said, because yeah, I'm looking forward to her lifestyle book as well. But I will say something we preached to our officer team at probably every meeting, honestly, was grace, giving each other grace and recognizing the need for that, especially in design school, because there are times where you're just tired. That's just, you're just exhausted sometimes. And just recognizing that and kind of being forgiving, and then stepping up to the plate and saying, how can I help? And what do we need to do to get this done? Anything's possible as long as you have a great team of people to lean on. I did not do this alone. Allie did not do this alone. This was a large team effort. And part of that was giving each other grace. So that would be my main takeaway kind of from that whole experience. Especially if you know Enneagrams, I'm a type 1. I am a perfectionist. I want everything done right. So giving grace is not easy always, but I think having us as a group recognize that just benefited us in the long run.
That's really, really helpful to hear. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being so vulnerable, transparent, and honest. I think it was a very authentic conversation that will be very tangible and rewarding for the people who were here. Thank you, the three of you. I really appreciate your time, talents, and expertise.